Chapter 1: The Winds of Fate and the Cheyenne People. The late autumn winds that swept through the Kansas plains in 1837 carried a chill that signaled the end of a season and the approach of another. To the Cheyenne people, these winds were a reminder that the cycle of life and death, prosperity and hardship, would continue despite their struggles. They spoke to the warriors, the elders and the young alike, urging them to remember the past while preparing for the future. The plains were not only their home, but also their battleground, where every breeze whispered stories of ancestors long gone. The Cheyenne, a proud and powerful nation, had long lived on the Great Plains, moving between the fertile areas of what is now Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and Kansas. They were a tribe rich in culture, known for their warrior societies, their spiritual beliefs, and their deep connection to the land. They were horse people whose lives were inextricably linked to the mighty buffalo, which they hunted with both reverence and necessity. The Cheyenne had a unique system of warrior societies, each with its own set of rituals, codes, and roles. Among these, the Dog Soldiers were the most esteemed. The Dog Soldiers were not simply warriors. They were the protectors of the Cheyenne people. They embodied the spirit of the tribe's military prowess and upheld the values of courage, loyalty, and strength. They were revered not only for their skills in battle, but for their role as defenders of the Cheyenne way of life. Porcupine Bear, the leader of the Dog Soldiers, was a man who commanded respect not only because of his skill in battle, but also for his wisdom and his ability to unify his people. He was a war chief, a figure whose role went beyond mere leadership. He was a symbol of the Cheyenne spirit. His very name evoked the image of strength and resilience in a world that was rapidly changing, where the Cheyenne were constantly clashing with other tribes and facing encroaching settlers. Porcupine Bear represented the last bastion of a traditional way of life that was under siege from all sides. But Porcupine Bear's strength as a leader would soon be tested in ways he had not foreseen. The massacre of the Bowstring Society, a brutal, tragic event that would forever alter the course of the Cheyenne, was about to cast its dark shadow over him. Chapter 2: The Massacre of the Bowstring Society. The Bowstring Society was a prestigious warrior society within the Cheyenne Nation. Composed of some of the bravest and most respected men, these warriors were known for their exceptional fighting skills, their courage in battle, and their unwavering loyalty to the Cheyenne people. The massacre of these men would become a turning point, not just for the Cheyenne, but for the entire tribe. The Kiowa and Comanche, two powerful and long-standing enemies of the Cheyenne, had long sought to undermine the Cheyenne's strength. They were both formidable warrior tribes, skilled in raiding and skilled in battle. In the autumn of 1837, the Kiowa and Comanche made a bold move against the Cheyenne. They launched a surprise attack on a group of 42 Cheyenne warriors from the Bowstring Society, who had been caught off guard while returning from a successful hunt. The ambush was swift, brutal, and devastating. The Kiowa and Comanche warriors, armed with superior weaponry and tactics, descended upon the unsuspecting Cheyenne. The Cheyenne warriors fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered and overwhelmed. One by one they were cut down, their blood staining the earth they had fought so hard to protect. In the end, 42 Cheyenne warriors, each a son, brother, father, and husband, lay dead, their bodies left for the vultures. The massacre was a devastating blow to the Cheyenne, one that would send ripples of grief and fury throughout the entire nation. For Porcupine Bear, this loss was personal. Many of the fallen warriors were his close relatives, brothers, cousins, and childhood friends. The Bowstring Society was not just a warrior group, it was a brotherhood of family. The pain of losing so many warriors in such a brutal manner was a blow that went beyond mere loss. It was a challenge to the very identity of the Cheyenne. It was as though the Cheyenne had been struck at the heart of their strength. Chapter 3: The Rallying Cry for Vengeance. Porcupine Bear, as the leader of the Dog Soldiers, took it upon himself to rally his people. In the face of this tragedy, he knew that the Cheyenne could not afford to show weakness, not in the face of such an atrocity. The people needed not just to grieve, but to act. They needed vengeance. The Kiowa and Comanche had to pay for what they had done. But rallying the people was no simple task. The Cheyenne were a people steeped in tradition and spirituality, and many among them, especially the elders, believed in the importance of maintaining peace, of keeping balance between the tribes. Revenge, while often seen as a necessity for maintaining honor, was not always the first course of action. Yet Porcupine Bear, with his deep understanding of his people's values and his unshakable belief in justice, knew that the time for peace had passed. This was a moment for action. He traveled from camp to camp, speaking to the warriors, the chiefs, and the people. He called upon the young men to prove their courage, to show that they would not stand idly by in the face of such violence. He spoke to the elders, urging them to support the cause, to recognize that revenge was not just about personal satisfaction, but about the survival of the Cheyenne way of life. Porcupine Bear's words resonated deeply with the Cheyenne. His reputation as a warrior and leader lent weight to his call for vengeance. The young men, eager to prove themselves, were quick to answer the call. But it was not just the young warriors who responded. Even some of the older, more experienced fighters, whose days of battle were supposed to be behind them, found themselves rekindled by the fire of revenge. Chapter for the incident at the village. A moment of reckoning. While preparing for the upcoming raid, Porcupine Bear's leadership would be tested in ways he did not anticipate. One fateful evening, during a visit to a village where he had family, Porcupine Bear found himself involved in an altercation that would have far-reaching consequences. The village, filled with grief-stricken Cheyenne women and children, was struggling to hold together after the massacre. The mood was somber, the air heavy with mourning. It was within this charged atmosphere that a fight broke out. The argument began as a petty dispute between two young men, one of whom was Porcupine Bear's cousin. The quarrel quickly escalated, fueled by alcohol, which had become more readily available in the village. In recent years, the young men began to fight, exchanging blows and shouts. The camp, though accustomed to bickering, had never seen anything like this before. The dispute was one of those trivial disagreements that often occurred in the heat of the moment, but it quickly grew more violent. Porcupine Bear, sitting calmly nearby, watched the altercation with a detached air. He was known for his composure, and it seemed that nothing could disturb his sense of peace. However, as the fight escalated and his cousin cried out for help, Porcupine Bear's attitude shifted. Rising from his seat, he walked over to the young men. In that moment, he made a fateful decision. Rather than intervene diplomatically, as he might have done in other circumstances, Porcupine Bear took out his knife and struck the young man who had been attacking his cousin. The strike was swift and deadly, a response that mirrored the brutality of the situation. As the fight came to a bloody conclusion, Porcupine Bear's family, loyal to him and fearful of retribution, took action to finish what he had started. The Kiowa man was killed, his body left at the scene, as the Cheyenne warriors returned to their homes. But the violence did not go unnoticed. Word of the incident spread quickly, and the leaders of the Cheyenne Nation convened to discuss the matter. The incident was not simply a matter of personal grievance. It had the potential to tear apart the very fabric of Cheyenne society and the Cheyenne culture. Leadership was not just about strength. It was about the ability to maintain order and uphold the values of the tribe. The Council of Elder Chiefs was forced to make a difficult decision. In the end, they decided that Porcupine Bear must be banished from the tribe. It was a punishment that cut deep, not just for him but for all who had followed him. Porcupine Bear's exile was a bitter blow to his pride and his sense of justice. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his days. Yet it was also a decision that would set him on a path that would lead to the revenge he so desperately sought. Chapter 5: The Raid. A fury unleashed with his exile official, Porcupine Bear found himself in a precarious situation. He was no longer a part of the Cheyenne tribe, but he was still a warrior, and his thirst for vengeance burned brighter than ever. His anger and grief over the massacre of the Bowstring Society, combined with the personal insult of his banishment, led him to make a fateful decision. He would lead his dog soldiers on a raid that would be as brutal and swift as the storm that raged in his heart. Porcupine Bear, now embittered by both personal and tribal loss, chose to target the Kiowa, the tribe responsible for the massacre of the Bowstring Society. He gathered a small but elite band of dog soldiers, warriors who were bound to him by loyalty, not just to the tribe but to the cause of justice. These warriors were his kin, his brothers in arms, each one skilled in the art of war and bound by the same thirst for vengeance. Their raid would take place under the cover of darkness, a strategic move meant to take the Kiowa completely by surprise. The plan was simple but effective. They would infiltrate the Kiowa encampment, kill or capture as many as possible, and return to the Cheyenne with the spoils of their victory. The Kiowa, in their eagerness for revenge, had not been as cautious as they should have been. They had been led into a false sense of security, lulled into thinking that the Cheyenne had been weakened by the loss of the bowstring society warriors. It was a grave mistake that would cost them dearly. The raid began at dawn. Just as the first rays of sunlight began to pierce the darkness, Porcupine Bear and his dog soldiers moved quickly, silently, their horses as quiet as the wind itself. They approached the Kiowa encampment with deadly intent, ready to strike when the time was right. The battle that ensued was one of sheer brutality. Arrows flew, the sound of hooves pounding the earth echoed across the plains, and the cries of the dying filled the air. The Kiowa were caught completely off guard, their warriors scrambling to defend themselves as the Cheyenne warriors descended upon them like a storm. The battle lasted only minutes, but in that time the Kiowa were decimated. The Cheyenne warriors fought with an intensity and ferocity that only comes from years of mourning and the desire for vengeance. As the battle raged, Porcupine Bear fought at the front, his presence a symbol of the Cheyenne nation's resolve. With every swing of his weapon, he avenged the deaths of his brothers from the bowstring society. His actions were swift and merciless, and when the dust finally settled, the Kiowa lay defeated. The Cheyenne had achieved a bitter victory, but a victory nonetheless. Chapter 6: The Aftermath of Vengeance. The aftermath of the raid was a bittersweet moment for Porcupine Bear. While the victory brought some measure of satisfaction, it also brought with it the weight of its consequences. The Cheyenne had avenged their fallen warriors, but at what cost in the days that followed? Porcupine Bear returned to the Cheyenne with the spoils of the raid, scalps and weapons taken from the Kiowa. Despite the bloody nature of the battle, the Cheyenne adhered to their traditions. The scalps, which would have been a symbol of dishonor among the Cheyenne, were treated with reverence, as the warriors believed that the souls of the fallen would find peace in the afterlife. Porcupine Bear's victory, while decisive, did not bring the peace he had hoped for. The Cheyenne, though they had avenged the massacre of their warriors, were still a people divided. The wounds of the past, both personal and tribal, were deep and would take many years to heal. For Porcupine Bear, the path of vengeance had led him down a road from which there was no turning back. Though he had avenged the bowstring society, the consequences of his actions would shape the future of the Cheyenne.